Mother saw her dead son's face in an orphan boy, but what she discovered next left everyone speechless. Hello everyone, welcome to our story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Clara was a wealthy but broken-hearted widow who lived every day with the memory of her only son, Michael, who died in a tragic accident a few years ago. She was 54 years old now, but the sadness had made her feel much older. Clara kept Michael's bedroom exactly the same as when he was alive. She would often sit on his old bed, holding his favorite sweater close to her heart, breathing in the faint scent of her son that still lingered on the soft fabric. To fill the empty hole in her heart, Clara dedicated her life to helping children. She used her money to visit orphanages all around the city, bringing toys, books, and clothes to children who had no parents. This was her way of honoring Michael's memory. One sunny afternoon, Clara decided to visit Happy Valley Orphanage. She had heard they needed help, so she packed her car with presents and drove across town. Mrs. Johnson, the kind woman who ran the orphanage, welcomed Clara warmly. "Thank you so much for coming," she said. "The children will be excited to meet you." They walked through the building quickly, and then Mrs. Johnson led Clara outside to the playground where 32 children were playing. "Children," Mrs. Johnson called out. "Come meet our special visitor." All the kids came running over, laughing and chattering. They surrounded Clara, eager to meet someone new. Clara smiled and talked with each child, feeling a little bit warmer inside despite missing Michael terribly. But then something happened that made Clara's world stop. Sitting alone on a wooden bench under a big oak tree was a boy who looked about 11 years old. He was small and thin with messy brown hair and big dark eyes. He wasn't playing with the other children. Instead, he was quietly reading a book by himself. When Clara saw this boy's face, she felt like someone had hit her in the chest. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. Her heart felt like it had stopped beating. The boy looked exactly like Michael had when he was 11 years old. It wasn't just that they had the same hair color or height. This boy had Michael's exact face. The same nose. The same eyes. The same mouth. Even the same way of sitting with his shoulders slightly hunched forward. Clara put her hand over her heart and took a step backward. Was she dreaming? Was her sadness making her see things that weren't really there? "Mrs. Johnson," Clara whispered, her voice shaking. "Who is that boy sitting under the tree?" Mrs. Johnson looked where Clara was pointing. "Oh, that's Samuel," she said sadly. "He's been with us for almost 11 years now. Someone left him at our front gate when he was just a tiny baby. We never found out who his parents were." Clara stared at Samuel, unable to look away. As she watched, the boy tilted his head to one side while he was reading, exactly the same way Michael used to do when he was thinking hard about something. Can I talk to him?" Clara asked, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "Of course," Mrs. Johnson said. "But be patient with him. Samuel is very shy and doesn't trust grown-ups easily." Clara walked slowly toward the tree, her legs feeling weak and shaky. With each step she took, the boy looked more and more like her Michael. It was impossible, but it was happening right in front of her eyes. When she reached the bench, Samuel looked up from his book. When Clara saw his face up close, she almost cried out loud. Those were Michael's eyes looking back at her. Those were Michael's features, just younger and thinner. "Hello," Clara said softly, sitting down on the other end of the bench. Her hands were trembling. "I'm Clara. What's your name?" "Samuel," the boy said quietly, not looking directly at her. His voice was soft and careful, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. As Samuel spoke, Clara noticed something that made her heart beat even faster. The boy was humming very quietly under his breath, the same little tune that Michael used to hum when he was nervous. It was the lullaby Clara had sung to Michael when he was a baby. The same lullaby she hadn't heard in long years. "Do you like reading?" Clara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes," Samuel said, showing her his book about dinosaurs. "I like to learn about things." "What's your favorite dinosaur?" Clara asked. Samuel's face lit up a little. "The T-Rex. They were really big and strong." As he talked about dinosaurs, he tilted his head again in that familiar way, and Clara felt tears forming in her eyes. They talked for 20 more minutes about books and animals and school. The more they talked, the more Clara felt like she was talking to a young version of Michael. Every gesture, every expression, every little habit was exactly the same. When it was time for Clara to leave, Samuel looked up at her with those familiar eyes. "Will you come back and visit me again?" he asked quietly. Clara's throat felt tight. "Yes," she whispered. "I promise I'll come back." As Clara walked back toward her car with Mrs. Johnson, she couldn't stop thinking about Samuel. "Mrs. Johnson," Clara said. What do you know about Samuel's family? Where did he come from? Mrs. Johnson shook her head sadly. We don't know anything. Someone left him at our gate in the middle of the night with just a blanket and a note that said, "Please take care of him." No names, no information. We've never been able to find out who he belongs to. Clara nodded, but her mind was spinning with questions and impossible thoughts. As she got in her car to drive home, Clara looked back one more time at the playground. Samuel was still sitting under the tree, reading his book and humming softly to himself. Clara whispered one word under her breath, so quietly that no one could hear. Michael. That night, Clara couldn't sleep at all. She kept tossing and turning in her bed, thinking about Samuel's face. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those familiar dark eyes looking back at her. She saw the way he tilted his head. She heard that soft humming sound he made. It's impossible, Clara said to herself in the dark bedroom. But he looks exactly like Michael did. The next morning, Clara called Mrs. Johnson at the orphanage. Hello, Mrs. Johnson, Clara said. This is Clara from yesterday. I was wondering, could I come visit Samuel again today? Of course. Mrs. Johnson said happily. Samuel asked about you this morning. I think he really liked meeting you. Clara's heart jumped when she heard this. He asked about me? Yes, he wanted to know if the nice lady with the kind eyes would come back. You made quite an impression on him. Clara drove to Happy Valley Orphanage as fast as she could. When she arrived, she found Samuel sitting in the same spot under the oak tree, reading a different book. Hello, Samuel, Clara said, sitting down beside him on the bench. Samuel looked up and smiled, and when he smiled, Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was Michael's smile. The same crooked grin that had always made her heart melt. Hi, Clara, Samuel said shyly. I was hoping you would come back. I promised I would, Clara said. What are you reading today? Samuel showed her a book about space and planets. I like learning about the stars, he said. Do you think there are other people living on other planets? Clara remembered having this exact same conversation with Michael when he was 11. Michael had been fascinated by space and had dreamed of becoming an astronaut. Maybe there are, Clara said softly. What do you think? As Samuel talked about rockets and galaxies, Clara studied every detail of his face. The shape of his eyebrows was exactly like Michael's. The way his nose crinkled when he laughed was identical. Even the small freckle on his left cheek was in the same spot where Michael had one. Samuel, Clara said carefully, do you ever wonder about your real parents? About where you came from? Samuel's smile faded a little. He looked down at his book. Sometimes, he said quietly. But Mrs. Johnson says they probably couldn't take care of me, so they brought me here where I would be safe. Do you remember anything from when you were very little? Clara asked. Samuel shook his head. No, nothing. Mrs. Johnson says I was just a baby when they found me. I don't even know what my real last name is supposed to be. Clara's heart ached for this lonely boy, but she was also excited by a crazy idea that was forming in her mind. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara visited Samuel every single day. She brought him new books, toys, and his favorite snacks. She learned that he loved chocolate chip cookies just like Michael had. She discovered that he was afraid of thunderstorms, just like Michael had been. She noticed that he had a habit of counting things when he was nervous, exactly like Michael used to do. Every similarity made Clara more convinced that this wasn't just a coincidence. Clara's sister Janet came to visit one afternoon and found Clara looking at old photo albums. Clara, what are you doing? Janet asked, sitting down on the couch next to her. Look at this picture, Clara said, pointing to a photo of 11-year-old Michael. Now look at this. Clara pulled out her phone and showed Janet a picture she had secretly taken of Samuel at the orphanage. Janet gasped. Oh my goodness, Clara. They look almost exactly alike. But this is just a coincidence. It has to be. What if it's not a coincidence? Clara said, her eyes bright with hope. What if there's a reason Samuel looks so much like Michael? Janet looked worried. Clara, you're scaring me. What are you thinking? I think maybe Michael has come back to me somehow. Maybe his soul is in Samuel's body. Maybe God is giving me a second chance to be a mother. Clara, stop, Janet said firmly. You're talking crazy. People don't come back from the dead. Samuel is just a boy who happens to look like Michael did. You're seeing what you want to see because you miss your son so much. But Clara wouldn't listen to her sister's warnings. Every day she became more obsessed with Samuel. She started spending 6 hours a day at the orphanage just watching him and talking to him. Mrs. Johnson began to worry too. Clara, Mrs. Johnson said one day, I'm glad you care about Samuel, but maybe you should spend time with some of the other children as well. Samuel is getting very attached to you, and I'm concerned about what will happen if you stop coming." "I would never stop coming," Clara said quickly. "Samuel needs me. I can see it in his eyes. He's been waiting for someone to love him his whole life. But Clara, you need to be careful. Samuel has been disappointed before by adults who promised to care for him but then left. I don't want to see him get hurt again." Clara ignored Mrs. Johnson's concerns. All she could think about was Samuel and how much he reminded her of her lost son. One evening, Clara's friend Margaret came over for dinner. "Clara, I'm worried about you," Margaret said as they sat at the kitchen table. "Janet told me about this boy at the orphanage. She says you think he's somehow connected to Michael." "He is connected," Clara said stubbornly. "I know it sounds crazy, but there are too many similarities for it to be just chance." "Clara, listen to yourself," Margaret said gently. "You're a smart woman. You know that what you're suggesting is impossible. This boy just happens to look like Michael. That's all." "You don't understand," Clara said, getting upset. "I'm his mother. I would know if my child's spirit was right in front of me." Margaret reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "Honey, you're not this boy's mother. His mother was someone else, someone who couldn't take care of him. You're projecting your grief onto this child, and that's not fair to him or to you." But Clara pulled her hand away. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I know what I see. I know what I feel in my heart. Samuel belongs with me." That night, Clara made a decision that would change everything. She decided to find out the truth about Samuel once and for all. If he really was connected to Michael somehow, she needed proof. And she knew exactly how to get it. Clara picked up her phone and called a medical laboratory downtown. "Hello," she said to the person who answered. "I need to schedule a DNA test." The next day, Clara went to visit Samuel as usual. But this time she had a secret plan. "Samuel," Clara said, sitting down next to him under the oak tree, "I brought you a special snack today." She handed him a bag of his favorite chocolate chip cookies and a juice box. While Samuel ate happily, Clara carefully collected the straw from his juice box when he was finished. "Thank you for the cookies," Samuel said, giving her that crooked smile that looked so much like Michael's. "They were really good." "I'm glad you liked them," Clara said, putting the straw in her purse. Her heart was beating fast because she felt bad about being sneaky, but she had to know the truth. That afternoon, Clara drove to the medical laboratory with the straw that had Samuel's saliva on it. She also brought a hair from Michael's old hairbrush that she had kept in his bedroom. "I need to compare these two DNA samples," Clara told the lab technician, a young woman with kind eyes. "Are you sure you want to do this test?" the woman asked. "Sometimes the results can be very emotional for people." "I'm sure," Clara said firmly. "I need to know." "Okay. The results will be ready in 5 days. We'll call you when they're done." Those 5 days were the longest days of Clara's life. She could barely eat or sleep. She kept visiting Samuel every day, studying his face and looking for more signs that he was connected to Michael. On the 3rd day of waiting, something amazing happened. Clara was reading a story to Samuel when it started to rain heavily. Thunder crashed loudly in the sky and lightning flashed through the windows. Samuel suddenly got very scared. He grabbed Clara's arm and buried his face against her shoulder. "I don't like storms," he whispered, trembling. "They're too loud and scary." Clara's eyes filled with tears because Michael had done the exact same thing during storms when he was little. He would run to Clara and hide his face against her, saying almost the same words. "It's okay," Clara whispered, stroking Samuel's hair the same way she used to comfort Michael. "The storm will pass soon. You're safe with me." As she held Samuel close, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like a mother again. On the 5th day, Clara's phone finally rang. "Hello, this is Dr. Martinez from City Lab," said a man's voice. "Your DNA test results are ready." Clara's hands started shaking. What do the results say?" "Ma'am, I think you should come in to discuss these results in person. Can you be here this afternoon?" "Yes," Clara said quickly. "I'll be there right away." Clara drove to the lab as fast as she could. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She was sure the test would prove that Samuel was somehow connected to Michael. Dr. Martinez was a tall, serious man with gray hair and glasses. He looked at Clara with sad eyes. "Mrs. Clara," he said gently, "I have your DNA results here. I'm afraid the test shows no genetic relationship between the two samples you provided." Clara felt like the room was spinning around her. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "The boy's DNA and your son's DNA are not related at all. They don't share any family connection." "I'm sorry." Clara started crying right there in the doctor's office. All her hope crashed down around her like broken glass. But they look so much alike, she sobbed. He acts just like Michael did. He's afraid of storms. He loves the same books. He even hums the same song. Dr. Martinez handed her a box of tissues. Sometimes people can look very similar even when they're not related. And children who grow up without parents often copy behaviors they see in adults they want to please. I'm very sorry, but this boy is not your son or related to your son in any way. Clara drove home in a daze. She felt embarrassed and foolish. Everyone had been right. Jenna was right. Margaret was right. Mrs. Johnson was right. She had been seeing what she wanted to see because she missed Michael so desperately. For the next 3 days, Clara didn't go to the orphanage. She was too ashamed and sad. She had let herself believe in something impossible, and now she felt even more empty than before. But on the 4th day something happened that changed everything again. Clara was sitting in Michael's bedroom, holding his favorite sweater and crying. She had decided she needed to clean out his room and stop living in the past. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was just a grieving mother who had lost her mind. As she started going through Michael's desk drawers, she found an old shoebox pushed way back in the corner. Clara had never seen it before. Inside the box were letters, photographs, and papers she had never known existed. The letters were addressed to Michael, and they were from a girl named Sarah Martinez. As Clara read them, her hands began to shake. My dearest Michael, one letter said, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm pregnant. I'm scared to tell my parents. They would be so angry and disappointed in me. I know we're both young, but maybe we can figure this out together. Another letter, dated 2 months later, was more desperate. Michael, I've been calling and leaving messages, but you never call back. Are you getting my letters? The baby is due in a few months. My parents found out and they're furious. They say I've brought shame on our family. Please write back. I need to know you're there. A third letter, written in shaky handwriting, was heartbreaking. Michael, I had complications during the birth. The baby is a boy and he's healthy, but I'm very sick. The doctors are worried about me. If something happens to me, please find our son. I named him Samuel Michael Martinez. He has your eyes. I love you both so much. The last item in the box wasn't a letter at all. It was a newspaper clipping from 11 years ago with a small obituary. Sarah Elena Martinez, age 19, died from complications following childbirth. She is survived by her parents, Roberto and Maria Martinez, and her newborn son. Clara's tears fell onto the old paper. There was also a birth certificate showing that Sarah Martinez had given birth to a boy named Samuel on the exact date that would make him 11 years old now. The father's name on the certificate was listed as Michael Thompson. Clara realized with growing horror what must have happened. Michael had been away at college during his final year, and these letters had been delivered to his childhood bedroom while he was gone. Clara had simply put his mail in his desk drawer, planning to give it all to him when he came home for the holidays. But Michael had died in his car accident just 2 weeks before Christmas. He had never seen these letters. He had never known that Sarah was pregnant or that she had tried so desperately to reach him. He had died never knowing he had a son. Clara's hands were shaking as she picked up her phone and called the lab. Dr. Martinez, she said when he answered, this is Clara Thompson. I need you to run that DNA test again, but this time I need a different kind of test. Mrs. Thompson, I told you the results were very clear. The boy is not related to your son. Please just listen, Clara begged. I need a grandparent DNA test. I think Samuel might be my grandson, not my son. I found letters that show my son had a girlfriend who was pregnant. She died after giving birth 11 years ago. There was silence on the other end of the phone. That's a very different test, Dr. Martinez said slowly. Are you certain about these dates? Yes. I found proof. The birth certificate, the obituary, everything matches. Please, can you test the samples again? We still have both samples. We can run a grandparent-grandchild DNA test. But Mrs. Thompson, you should know that this test is not as definitive as a parent-child test. However, combined with the documentation you've found, it should give us a clear answer. I understand. Please do it. 2 days later, Dr. Martinez called again. This time his voice was excited. Mrs. Thompson, I have your results. The grandparent DNA test shows a 96% probability that you are this child's biological grandmother. Combined with the birth certificate and timeline you provided, I'm confident that Samuel is your grandson. Clara dropped the phone and fell to her knees in Michael's bedroom. She wasn't crazy. Samuel really was family. He was her grandson, Michael's son. But as the joy washed over her, a terrible sadness followed. Samuel had been abandoned at the orphanage as a baby. Someone in the Martinez family had given away Michael's son. They had let him grow up alone and unloved when he had a grandmother who would have loved him with all her heart. Clara wiped her tears and stood up. She gathered all the letters, the birth certificate, and the DNA results. She had a grandson to claim, and she needed to understand how he had ended up at the orphanage. The next day, Clara drove to the orphanage with all her evidence. Her hands were steady now. She knew exactly what she had to do. She found Samuel sitting alone in the corner of the playroom, looking sad and confused. He hadn't understood why Clara had stopped visiting. "Samuel," Clara said softly, kneeling down beside him. He looked up with tears in his eyes. "Are you mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Please don't leave me alone again." Clara's heart broke as she pulled him into her arms. "Oh, my sweet boy. You didn't do anything wrong. And I'm never going to leave you alone again. I promise." "Really?" Samuel whispered. "Really? Samuel, I have something very important to tell you. It's going to sound amazing, but it's true." Clara took a deep breath. "I'm your grandmother. Your daddy was my son, Michael. You're part of my family." Samuel stared at her with wide eyes. "I have a daddy? And a grandma?" "Your daddy died before you were born," Clara said gently, "but he would have loved you so much. And you have me. You'll always have me." For the first time since she'd known him, Samuel's face lit up with pure joy. "Does this mean I can come live with you? Does this mean I have a real family?" "Yes, my darling boy. You're coming home with me, and you're never going to be alone again." As Clara held her grandson tight, she made a silent promise to Michael. "I found him, my son. I found your boy, and I'm going to give him all the love you would have given him." But even as Clara felt this overwhelming joy, she knew there were still questions that needed answers. How had Samuel ended up at the orphanage? Who had abandoned him there as a baby? "Mrs. Thompson?" came a voice from behind her. It was Mrs. Johnson, the orphanage director, looking surprised to see Clara back after several days away. "Is everything all right?" Clara stood up, still holding Samuel's hand. "Mrs. Johnson, I need to speak with you privately. It's about Samuel." They walked to Mrs. Johnson's office while Samuel waited outside, playing with some toys. Clara spread the letters, birth certificate, and DNA test results across the desk. "Samuel is my grandson," Clara said simply. Mrs. Johnson's eyes grew wide as she read through the documents. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. This is incredible. But how did he end up here? When Samuel was brought to us 11 years ago, there was no information about his family. What do you remember about the night he was brought here?" Clara asked. Mrs. Johnson thought carefully. "It was late at night. An elderly couple brought him to our front gate. They said they had found him abandoned and couldn't care for him. They seemed very nervous and left quickly without giving much information." "An elderly couple?" Clara's heart began to race. "Did they give you their names?" "They said their names were Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, but they claimed they weren't related to the baby. They said they were just good Samaritans who found him." Clara felt her anger rising. The Martinez family, Sarah's parents, had lied. They hadn't found Samuel abandoned. They had abandoned him themselves. "Mrs. Johnson, based on these documents, I want to begin the legal process to adopt Samuel immediately." "Of course," Mrs. Johnson said, tears in her eyes. "This is wonderful news for Samuel. He's such a special boy, and he's been waiting his whole life for a family." Over the next few days, Clara worked with lawyers to start the adoption process. But she also hired a private investigator to find Roberto and Maria Martinez. She needed to understand why they had abandoned their own grandson. The investigator's report came back quickly. Roberto and Maria Martinez still lived in the same house they had 11 years ago. They owned a small grocery store in a neighborhood across town. Clara decided she needed to confront them face to face. On a Tuesday afternoon, Clara walked into Martinez Grocery. It was a small, family-run store with shelves packed with food and household items. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 60s with graying hair and tired eyes. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. "Are you Maria Martinez?" Clara asked. "Yes, I am. Do I know you?" Clara took a deep breath. "My name is Clara Thompson. I think we need to talk about your grandson Samuel." Maria's face went completely white. Her hands started shaking as she gripped the counter. I don't know what you're talking about," Maria stammered. "Yes, you do," Clara said firmly. "Samuel is the son of your daughter Sarah and my son Michael. You abandoned him at St. Mary's orphanage when he was just a baby." At that moment, an elderly man emerged from the back of the store. "What's going on, Maria?" he asked. Then he saw Clara and froze. "Who is this woman?" "Roberto," Maria whispered. "This is about the boy." Roberto's face hardened. "We don't know anything about any boy. You need to leave our store." But Clara didn't move. "Your daughter Sarah loved my son Michael. She tried to contact him when she was pregnant, but he never got her letters. He died in a car accident before Samuel was born. Sarah died giving birth to Samuel, and instead of contacting Michael's family, you threw away your own grandson like he was garbage." Maria began to cry. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "We were so ashamed. Sarah was not married. In our culture, in our family, this brought such shame. When Sarah died, we didn't know what to do with the baby. So you abandoned him?" Clara's voice was rising with anger. "You let your own flesh and blood grow up alone and unloved? We thought someone else would give him a better life," Roberto said defensively. "We couldn't handle the shame in our community." Clara's voice broke with emotion. "Shame? You were ashamed of an innocent baby? Do you have any idea what you put him through? Samuel spent 11 years thinking nobody wanted him. 11 years believing he was worthless." Maria was crying harder now. "We didn't mean for him to suffer. We thought he would be adopted quickly by a nice family. But he wasn't," Clara shouted, her composure finally breaking. "He lived in that orphanage his entire childhood, wondering why his own family didn't love him enough to keep him. And all this time I could have been loving him. I could have been raising my son's child." Other customers in the store had stopped to stare at the commotion. Clara's voice carried through the small space as years of grief and anger poured out of her. "You stole 11 years from that boy," Clara continued, tears streaming down her face. 11 years of birthdays, bedtime stories, Christmas mornings, scraped knees that needed kissing, and nightmares that needed comforting. You stole all of that from him and from me." Roberto stepped forward, his own eyes now filled with tears. "We made a mistake," he admitted quietly. "We were young parents too, scared and grieving for our daughter. We made the wrong choice." "Yes, you did," Clara said firmly. "But I'm here now, and I promise you this, Samuel will never feel unwanted or unloved again. Not for one single day of his life." Maria looked up through her tears. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to adopt him legally. I'm going to give him Michael's last name. And I'm going to love him the way Sarah would have wanted, and the way Michael would have if he had lived." The next week, Clara decided it was time to tell the whole community about Samuel's true identity. The annual St. Mary's Orphanage fundraiser was coming up, a big event where many wealthy donors from the city came to support the children. Clara knew this would be the perfect opportunity. On the night of the fundraiser, the orphanage was decorated with twinkling lights and filled with well-dressed people eating fancy food and bidding on auction items. Samuel was there too, wearing a new suit that Clara had bought him. He stayed close to her side, still getting used to the idea that he finally had a real family. When it came time for the speeches, Mrs. Johnson introduced Clara to talk about the importance of supporting the orphanage. Clara walked to the microphone, her heart pounding. Samuel watched from the front row, giving her an encouraging smile. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Clara began. "I've been supporting this orphanage for years, ever since I lost my son Michael in a tragic accident. I thought I was just trying to help other children in need. But recently I discovered something that changed my life forever." The room grew quiet as people sensed something important was about to be revealed. 3 weeks ago, I met a boy named Samuel who lives here at St. Mary's. When I first saw him, I was struck by how much he resembled my late son. I thought it was just a coincidence, maybe wishful thinking from a grieving mother. Clara paused, looking directly at Samuel. "But it wasn't a coincidence. Samuel is my grandson. He is my son Michael's child." Gasps echoed through the room. People began whispering to each other in shock. 11 years ago, Samuel's mother Sarah died giving birth to him. His maternal grandparents, overwhelmed by grief and shame, abandoned him at this orphanage as a newborn. My son Michael died never knowing he had a child, and I spent years never knowing I had a grandson. In the back of the room, Clara spotted Roberto and Maria Martinez. They had come to the fundraiser, probably hoping to see Samuel from a distance. When they heard Clara's words, Maria covered her face with her hands. Clara's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Samuel has lived his entire life believing that nobody wanted him. He has spent 11 years in this orphanage, not knowing that he had a grandmother who would have loved him from the moment he was born." She gestured toward the back of the room. "The people who abandoned him are here tonight. Roberto and Maria Martinez, Samuel's maternal grandparents, are sitting in the back row." All eyes turned to the elderly couple. Roberto stood up slowly, his face red with shame and emotion. Maria remained seated, crying into her hands. We made a terrible mistake," Roberto called out, his voice shaking. "When our daughter Sarah died, we were devastated. We were scared and ashamed, and we made the worst decision of our lives." The room was completely silent now. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Maria finally stood up beside her husband. "We have regretted it every single day for 11 years, she said through her tears. "We came here tonight because we wanted to see Samuel, to see how he had grown up. We never stopped thinking about him." Clara felt her anger rising again, but then she looked at Samuel. The 11-year-old boy was staring at the Martinez couple with wide, confused eyes. He had no idea these were his other grandparents, the ones who had given him away. Samuel stood up from his chair and walked toward Clara at the microphone. "Clara," he whispered loudly enough for people to hear, "are those people, are they my family too?" Clara's heart broke at the innocent question. She knelt down to Samuel's level and spoke into the microphone so everyone could hear. "Yes, Samuel. Those are your mother's parents. They are your grandparents too." Samuel looked back at Roberto and Maria, then at Clara. "But why did they leave me at the orphanage if they're my family?" The question hung in the air like a painful truth that no one wanted to answer. Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized Samuel was learning about his abandonment in front of hundreds of people. "Sometimes adults make very bad decisions when they're scared and sad," Clara said gently. "It doesn't make it right, but that's what happened to you." Samuel nodded slowly, processing this information. Then he surprised everyone by walking toward Roberto and Maria. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the small boy approached the couple who had abandoned him. "Are you sorry?" Samuel asked them directly. Maria dropped to her knees in front of Samuel, sobbing. "Yes, mi nieto. We are so sorry. We have been sorry every day since we left you here." "Nieto means grandson," Roberto explained to Samuel, his own voice choking with emotion. "We never stopped loving you, even though we made the terrible choice to leave you." Samuel looked at them for a long moment, then back at Clara. "Clara, do I have to choose between you and them?" Clara walked over and put her arms around Samuel. "No, sweetheart. Family doesn't work that way. But you get to decide who you want in your life and how much." The room remained silent as everyone watched this incredible scene unfold. Many people were crying, moved by the raw emotion and the innocence of Samuel's questions. "I want to live with Clara," Samuel announced clearly. "She's been taking care of me and she loves me. But..." He looked back at Roberto and Maria. "Maybe you could visit sometimes? If you promise never to leave me again?" Maria nodded frantically. "We promise. We will never leave you again if you'll let us be part of your life." Clara stood up, still holding Samuel's hand. She addressed the crowd one final time before the evening could continue. "Tonight was supposed to be about supporting the children of St. Mary's Orphanage," she said. "And I want everyone to remember that Samuel's story, while it has a happy ending, represents what happens when children are abandoned or forgotten." She squeezed Samuel's hand. "But it also shows that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that family isn't just about blood, it's about choosing to love and protect each other every single day." The crowd erupted in applause. Many people were wiping tears from their eyes, deeply moved by what they had witnessed. Over the next few months, Clara worked with her lawyers to finalize Samuel's adoption. The legal process was smooth since she had all the necessary documentation and DNA proof. On a sunny Thursday morning in November, Clara and Samuel stood before a judge as the adoption was made official. "Samuel Martinez Thompson," the judge announced, "you are now legally the son of Clara Thompson, with all the rights and privileges that come with being part of her family." Samuel beamed as he heard his new name for the first time. "I have two last names now?" he asked Clara. "Yes," Clara smiled. "Martinez to honor your mother Sarah, and Thompson to carry on your father Michael's legacy." The staff at St. Mary's Orphanage threw a celebration party for Samuel's adoption. Children who had been his roommates and friends cheered as Samuel cut a cake that read, "Welcome home, Samuel." Mrs. Johnson gave a speech about how Samuel's story had inspired the whole community to think differently about adoption and family. "Samuel came to us as a baby with no name and no family," Mrs. Johnson said. "Today he leaves us with a full name, a loving grandmother, and the knowledge that he was never truly alone. He just had to wait a little longer to find his way home." The local newspaper wrote a story about Clara and Samuel's reunion, calling it a miracle of love and second chances. People from all over the city reached out to Clara, sharing their own stories of loss and found family. Several families came forward to adopt other children from St. Mary's, inspired by Samuel's story. Roberto and Maria Martinez kept their promise. They visited Samuel once a month, bringing him books and stories about his mother Sarah. They taught him some Spanish words and shared photos of Sarah when she was young. Samuel enjoyed these visits, but he was always happy to go home with Clara afterward. "They're nice," Samuel told Clara after one visit, "but you're my real grandmother. You're the one who chose to love me." Clara's heart swelled with pride and joy every time Samuel called her his real grandmother. Clara realized that her grief over losing Michael had transformed into something beautiful. She still missed her son terribly, but now she had Samuel, a living reminder of Michael's capacity for love. One evening, as they sat together in what used to be Michael's bedroom but was now Samuel's room, Clara was reading him a bedtime story. Samuel looked up at her with those familiar eyes that reminded her so much of her son. "Clara," Samuel said quietly, "do you think my daddy Michael would have liked me?" Clara set down the book and pulled Samuel close to her. "Oh, my sweet boy, he would have adored you. You have his kind heart, his curiosity about the world, and his beautiful smile. Every day I see more of him in you." Samuel smiled and snuggled closer. "I wish I could have met him." "In a way, you do meet him every day," Clara whispered, stroking Samuel's hair. "Every time you show kindness to someone, every time you ask thoughtful questions, every time you laugh, that's Michael's spirit living on through you." As Samuel drifted off to sleep, Clara sat beside his bed and whispered the words that had become her nightly prayer. "Through you my son lives on." She had lost Michael, but in finding Samuel, she had discovered that love doesn't end with death. It finds new ways to grow and flourish. Sometimes what seems like unbearable loss can turn into unexpected redemption when love chooses acceptance over denial. Clara had learned that family isn't just about the people we're born to, but about the people who choose to love us unconditionally. And as she watched her grandson sleep peacefully in his own bed, in his own home, surrounded by love, she knew that some miracles are worth waiting 11 years to find. Samuel was no longer a nameless orphan. He was Samuel Martinez Thompson, beloved grandson, heir to both Clara's wealth and her boundless love, and the living legacy of a father he would never meet but whose love would guide him always. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.